housekeeping things before we get started here. I'm sure there will be several people who would like to speak tonight. Our request would be if you've got something unique, something that adds value to the conversation, please, by all means, do so. If your statement is that I don't want it, I think that we could take this until midnight if that's the case. So by all means, if you have something to add to the conversation, you're certainly welcome to do so. We're going to start out. We've got a few people that have requested to be have a few minutes to speak. So Mr. Pueblo is going to speak first. So Kurt, please get us started. Looks like we're opening the presentation. One more thing why this is coming up. I think that there's some misconception about this particular request tonight. This is the Area Plan Commission, which has responsibility of zoning on these parcels. There will be a lot of discussion regarding a landfill. This petition tonight has nothing to do with excavating a landfill. This petition is regarding the zoning of this property. Currently it's in an A1 zoning, and they were asking to have an I2 zoning. So certainly understand all of the comments and questions, but please keep in mind that should this or some form of this pass, best way Vex Farms would come back and make another request for potentially a landfill. So please keep that in mind, how this process works. While that's loading, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure. My name is Kurt Pueblo. I'm the environmental manager. I work for Bestway in Decatur Hills Landfill. The petition's actually in the name of Vex Farms. Vex is the property owner. That it's owned by the same people as Decatur Hills and Bestway. That's just the company that owns farm ground within the organization. I'm happy to go ahead without the presentation. I've got my notes here, and I can just...
Once I get it, I'll catch up with you.
Okay, all right, that's fine. So that's kind of why the petition is in Vex Farms, but I just want you to know, most of the folks here are more familiar with Decatur Hills and Bestway Disposal. So I just want to make sure we understand the connection there. I'm going to backtrack a little bit because there's some new folks here. So
Sure.
Okay. Bestway and Decatur Hills have been in the community since 1991 and active in the local community, working with churches and schools and other organizations. As far as employment between the two companies, Bestway and Decatur Hills, we have about 70 full-time employees. That puts us in about the top 3% by the number of employees within Decatur County. So we like to think that we're a major employer and put a lot of food on a lot of tables here in Decatur County. In 2019, the wages and benefits paid out of this office, Bestway has operations elsewhere in Indiana, but just what was paid out in the Greensburg office was $5.5 million in wages and benefits. The total economic impact for 2019 includes that $5.5 million in wages and benefits, as well as $4.8 million in direct spending, fuel, tires, parts, supplies, things that the company needs to operate. And then we pay about $127,000 a year in property taxes and fees and things that go directly to Decatur County, not including any taxes that go to the state and then dribble back. So. In the presentation, there's some pictures for folks that aren't familiar with the site, just showing the scale house and the office there at the landfill, a couple views of from the area around that. And then we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the facility at the existing landfill. Decatur Hills has a voluntary gas collection system where we collect the gas that's produced by the waste in the landfill. Right now that gas is just flared. At some of our other facilities we have processes in place to recover energy from that gas. up in Randolph County. We have a facility that produces renewable natural gas right on site. We fuel about 20 trucks out of our own fleet right there. In Indianapolis, we just had a ribbon cutting yesterday for a multi-million-dollar renewable gas plant that's going to be producing vehicle fuel in the Indianapolis market. It'll be the equivalent of about 50 million gallons of fuel over 5 years, so about a little under 10 million gallons a year. We're not to the point where we can put that kind of system in here. It's, the Randolph County was about a $10 million investment. We don't quite have the gas here to support that, but we hope to get there soon. There have been some questions at some of the meetings in the past. Decatur Hills, like all modern landfills, has a multi-layered liner system that is built on a 3-foot thick layer of compacted clay, and then has like a synthetic liner, 60 mil synthetic liner on top of that, and then a drainage system to collect any wastewater that's coming down through the waste. That wastewater then goes to a pump system and is pumped to the city wastewater treatment plant here in Greensburg. The wastewater coming from the landfill is sampled on a monthly basis by folks at our facility. We collect a sample, send it off to a lab. The city also collects a sample and has it tested at their lab. All of this to say that wastewater coming from landfill is collected in order to prevent contamination of the local groundwater. The landfill is surrounded by a network of groundwater monitoring wells, which are sampled on a semi-annual basis. Those samples are sent to an outside lab, and then the report from all that goes to IDEM. Let's see. There is I had a cross-section in there. It's going to be hard to describe. So we put together a cross-section just to give you kind of a visual of the landfill liner system in relation to, there have been questions about a bedrock aquifer in the area. And so just kind of a visual to show you that the liner system, there's about a 30 to 60 foot layer of silty clays and till between the bottom of the liner system and the top of the bedrock aquifer. Keep going, Debbie. One more. Yeah. So this is that cross section, just to give you a visual. It's simplified a little bit, but it's based on site-specific borings and site-specific monitoring wells. So the brownish wavy line across the top represents the liner system under the landfill. And then, I don't know if you can really see the color, but it's a greenish color. A greenish color in here represents the till. There are some small sand lenses within that till that have water in them. That's the water that's monitored as it flows generally from the northwest part of the site towards the southeast, towards the stream over here along the eastern border. Then this till at the shallowest place is about 30 feet, and then this is the approximate top of the bedrock here. It's not flat like that, but it's between 30 and 60 feet below the bottom of the landfill. Based on the site-specific soil borings that we did, the hydraulic conductivity of that is I'll put it in decimal. It's a decimal point with 7 zeros and then a 7. So you've got a very, very small number, centimeters per second. Gives you like a 400-year transit time vertically.
400 years per foot?
No, 400 years for the whole,
Okay.
for that whole thing. But you've got this, in between that, you've got this horizontal unit, which is monitored, with the idea being that if there were any contaminant getting from the landfill trying to go down, it would be intercepted by this horizontal system and picked up at the monitoring wells.
What's the average distance between your monitoring well and your liner?
The monitoring wells are actually on the outside.
Correct.
So
How
they have
far
to be
away?
within 50 feet.
50.
Yeah, 50 feet of the edge of the landfill.
This map was developed by,
By our geologist. So the reason for the waviness is because it's kind of a diagonal cross section, and so the liner is at different elevations as you go north and south versus east and west. So it gives you a little bit of a wave there. Okay. And then we also have significant stormwater controls in place, sediment basins and other things to improve the stormwater quality at the site. The next slide is just a picture of the active disposal area at the existing Decatur Hills landfill. And then the recycle building. In 2019, we sent out about 7 million pounds of recyclables out to recycling plants in Indianapolis at a cost of, with trucking and everything, it's probably getting close to $100 a ton now to send recyclables out to the processing plants. Then the next slide. This is really what we're here for today. Like Mr. Stone said, we are here to request rezoning of our property to the west of County Road 280 East. And then this is 421 down here. This is the existing landfill, the existing Decatur Hills landfill. And then basically everything inside this kind of dash line here is what we're asking to be rezoned from A1 to I2. The total of that is just over 150 acres, 150.07, I believe. Within that, we drew this line here, this dot. This dotted line represents all of the minimum setbacks. So it's not taking into account any environmental concerns, any restrictions imposed by the BZA, any additional restrictions imposed by IDEM. This is the bare minimum setbacks. So just to say that that's showing like the outside of anything that ever could be landfill. And that is 107.58 acres out of the 150. The actual landfill that would be built once we get through the BZA and the IDEM would probably be quite a bit smaller than that. To put it in perspective, the existing landfill, we have 133 acres that's zoned, and of that, 74 acres is actual landfill. Just the way that it fits into the property with setbacks and things like that, that's kind of how that shakes out. Rezone requests have to, the next slide please, have to address 4 key elements. Talk about current conditions, whether or not our request is in compliance with the comprehensive plan, the effect on property values, and whether or not the request represents responsible development and growth. Current conditions, this property is currently farmed. You can go on to the next one, Debbie, sorry. Property is currently farmed. This is a couple views of the property. As the landfill is developed over time, we would intend to continue farming the balance of that ground over that time. With regard to the comprehensive plan, next slide, please. The current comprehensive plan directly addresses the need for expansion of the landfill and calls out for the area around the landfill. This is County Road 280, so this is the area that requesting to be rezoned, and this is the current landfill on the other side of the road there. So it's called out as industrial in the future use maps within the comprehensive plan. Next slide. Property values, we had a study done last year when we first submitted this petition back in July. And at that time, we were looking at sale prices across the county increasing about 10% since 2017. In the area around the landfill, though, we've had 14 homes that have been constructed within 1 mile of the landfill since 1992. And then as far as trying to look at comparables, we had 5 sales in the previous 2 years that were within a 2-mile radius. 3 of them were within 1 mile of the landfill. And those sale prices were roughly 24% above assessed values, which is pretty common throughout Decatur County. So we feel like the presence of the landfill is not really having an impact on the property values. Then the next slide, responsible development growth. The rezoning will allow our operation to have a life and allow for continued growth of a major local employer. The comprehensive plan envisions a centralized waste management facility. We think that that's going to, rezoning this area for expansion of the existing landfill falls in line with that. And then the last thing is that a healthy waste management industry supports recycling and other environmental improvements. That's the way that stuff gets paid for, is through a healthy waste industry. So, and that's really all that I have today. So,
Right. Thank you, sir.
questions now, or you'd like to maybe
Let's
come
do
back
this. I
later?
appreciate that. What I'd like to do, there's a few folks who are also going to speak, so before
Sure.
we get off on too many tangents, what I'd like to do is allow those folks a few minutes, so thank you for that. Next up, I'd like to have Josh Marsh, our mayor, come. He's going to speak for a few minutes, and I think he may have some information shared by someone else.
Well, both, if the presentation's on the gray one. Or that's his clicker. Yeah, we need both. There's a PowerPoint on there. If you just pull it up for the next one. I don't need it. Good evening, Chairman Stone and the board. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. So my name is Joshua Marsh, Mayor for the City of Greensburg, of course, and this evening we wanted to bring a couple folks to share some information with you from the city's perspective, not necessarily one way or the other, just so that you have the facts about how it affects the city. Obviously, the city has an invested interest in this and in different capacities, and you'll hear from 2, potentially 3 gentlemen with me this evening. Of course, our number 1 priority is always public safety, and how does that work? This isn't just for city residents, tonight's presentation, because we do supply the water to rural water, so it does affect county residents as well, and you'll hear about that as well. I have with me our water superintendent, Rick Denny. He has 20 years as our superintendent here in the city and has working knowledge of our current facility, our current well system, and our new facility that we are building. He will be available for questions from the board if you have them as we go through the evening from that point of view. I also have Mr. James Carr with me. He is owner and president of Hydrophase Inc. Hydrophase Inc. is an environmental consulting company that provides solutions related to groundwater resources, development and protection, and hydraulic analysis, say that fast, as well as an environmental compliance company. Hydrophase has been involved with the creation and implementation of Greensburg's wellhead protection plan as mandated by state and federal law for the last 7 years, but has been working with the city of Greensburg for nearly 14 years. Hydrophase was retained by the city of Greensburg to provide expert analysis and relating to the landfill and zoning issues, to provide that expert opinion, and then to answer any questions you may have about any threats to the city's water supply. Mr. Carr will present for a couple minutes with the chairman's blessing to share our directional feed for the city's wells and share his professional assessment of any threats or lack of to the city's water supply. In addition to public safety, which is always priority number one, I also have a responsibility for economic development, growth of our community. I realize that growth and development is something I've spent a lot of time talking about, and it's what this board is here for as well, and that this topic has been controversial in both directions because it is both potentially a detractor but also maybe an attractor for financial investment in our community. That being said, right, it is an idea that if you build a bigger landfill, people will not want to be near it or in the area with it. That's fair too. I think there's also the flip side to that coin being if you have an industry or people that contribute waste to the society and to the landfill, they don't want a higher cost of living when it comes to a higher trash fee. An industry will not want to pay to move their trash elsewhere or to move it out of the county, so they will not locate here. So I think we have both arguments to that. And to that point, I have Street Commissioner Mark Klosterkamper with me this evening, who will share the impacts that it will have on the sanitation department and how the citizens of Greensburg would be affected should our agreement with Bestway change in some capacity. That being said, I won't speak for the landfill, but the landfill does collect trash and recycles throughout the county, so it is also a county-wide impact on trash pickup. As a side note, I do not have Superintendent Jeff Smith with us this evening. He is our wastewater superintendent, but we do process all of the leachate that comes from Decatur Hills and also the Decatur County or the Tinsman landfill as well. That is part of the services that we offer and that we work with. I know that we have to look to all aspects as a community for this controversial topic. But we do need to work with the professionals that I've brought with us and Bestway and their professionals to make sure that the state and local guidelines and regulations that this body set are met and followed. I'm not arguing for that in any capacity. And I know that you guys are just the zoning body and that is an important piece of this as we move forward. So I still feel that it's probably valid to hear from the gentleman here. As a side note, I've spent a couple hours out at the facility and talked to Mark Fixmer several times on the phone about this process and what it looks like. I was thoroughly impressed with the facility, how clean and tidy it was, and what a sort of neat ship that they do run. And I believe that they will continue to do that. And I've seen nothing but the best from Bestway, and they've been incredibly helpful. If the board's willing, I would like to let Mr. Carr speak and then Mr. Klosterkamper, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate being here and bringing these folks along. Please feel free to come up, ask that you would, state your name.
My name is James Carr. I'm with Hydrophase, and like Mayor said, we've been contracted with the city several times in the last 13 years, and I believe the most recent time was in 2018 and also in 2013 when we did the wellhead protection plan updates and preparation. So that is actually a page out of one of my reports, Hydrophase, the little thing in the logo in the lower right-hand corner. And I believe I have some additional slides here I can forward. Okay, let me add one here with the well. So you can't really see it that well from the back here, but the wells, I should step back a second. The wellhead protection plan is something that I think Mayor alluded to briefly, that the state of Indiana requires, and the reason behind it is to sort of get out ahead of potential contaminant problems for that could theoretically impact city wells. And so there's several stages in that. The first thing is to delineate where the capture zone is for the pumping wells. Anytime you have a well with it's in sand and gravel or in limestone, when you pump out of it, it creates a cone of depression and draws water towards it. So it captures water in a certain area, and that area is dependent on the groundwater flow direction, the thickness of the formation, and other things that I won't get into, but that's the first step of the wellhead protection. Secondly, you do a potential contaminant source inventory. So there's whether it's gas stations or RCRA handlers or spills or anything like that. There's a record of those things within that wellhead protection area. And then there's management and contingency plans that are developed to address those concerns in that wellhead protection area. It's a capture zone, and I'll get to that, show you how that was developed here pretty quickly. Let me go back. Yeah, the wells, I don't know how well you can see them from where you're sitting, but they're like blue dots with a cross through them. There's 3 of them. Oh, I actually had this, I forgot about. Yeah, there's 3 of them near up there, and then there's, I think, 3 more. If I'm doing anything wrong, Rick, just correct me. It looks like there's 3 there and 3 up there. So there's, to go to the next slide, all these figures are required by IDEM. It's a pretty thorough process that is behind developing a wellhead protection plan, and particularly the delineation part, which defines where the water is coming from to the best of our knowledge. What we did do, that's a bedrock topography map there. You've got, it's just like a surface topography map, only it shows where, to the best of our knowledge, based on well logs that are on record, where the top of your aquifer, the limestone is, and generally it's higher elevations to the northeast and lower elevations to the southwest. And I have a couple arrows on there, well, one arrow showing the general slope of the bedrock. That's one of the things that's required. Secondly, this is a more smooth diagram, but it indicates the general direction of groundwater flow within that aquifer. Again, oops, let me go back. Again, from northeast, it's a little bit south of west. That's the flow direction, and that's based on information from probably hundreds of well logs from the area. So it's not just a couple data points, it's a whole lot of data points that produces this and the previous diagram. The end point of all this was to, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, determine a wellhead capture zone. In other words, where do the flow lines go where the water is induced towards your 2 concentration of wells to the north and to the west. Generally, these red lines represent what's called 5-year times of travel. Roughly 5 years for water that's out in this direction to eventually be captured flowing to one of these wells. So the main takeaway from this, and you'll see the groundwater flow direction is indicated by one of these arrows. And this is again based on many, maybe a couple hundred or more data points from the area, because these logs have been on file with the DNR for decades. And you can draw a pretty good picture from that where the bedrock highs are and where the groundwater highs are. And of course, groundwater follows gravity and is captured in these wells in this general configuration. Now, how this is relevant to this evening's issue is the landfill is down in this region somewhere on 421. I'm not sure exactly where because it's off the map. But the concern is that the landfill, as I understand it, the question has been raised whether anything leachate from the landfill would impact the city wells. And it's been demonstrated before in a previous presentation by Bestway that they've got a liner, a multiple layer liner. I'm not going to speak for them, but just to summarize what I understand they were saying. And you've got several tens of feet of glacial till beneath that, which is relatively impermeable, more impermeable than most materials you'll find in this state, most natural materials. So in order for anything from there, oops, let me go back in and we'll forward, Okay, from anything in this area to somehow get up there, it would first have to somehow get out of the landfill, breach the liner, go through tens of feet of glacial till, which although sometimes it can be fractured, those fractures are typically found in the shallower regions, shallower depths. And there's also the clay absorptive capacities of till, which tends to absorb potential contaminants. Would have to go through all that and then somehow get to the water, and then it would have to, instead of flowing by gravity, it would have to somehow make a right turn and go up to the well fields, which is not scientifically feasible, or I should say not extremely unlikely, or just not going to happen. Based on that, that's the takeaway from this. Is I was just asked to contribute based on my experience on observing the groundwater and the bedrock in this area in the context of the wellhead protection program, to demonstrate the flow direction, and these captured zones here will be basically perpendicular to these. These are called equipotential lines, or you could say groundwater elevation lines, the same thing as a topographic map or the bedrock map, slide or two earlier. It describes an elevation of where the groundwater is at. So, and just to summarize, if any theoretical impact from anything from the landfill would require a series of improbable events all following each other, and each improbable event based on the previous improbable event being fulfilled. So the biggest demonstration of the unlikelihood of it being impacted is simply recognizing where the groundwater flow is coming from, to the northeast, not from the southeast. And that's demonstrated by numerous compilation of numerous data, hundreds of data logs for wells drilled in the area, and the water level data. So that's about all I had.
Thank you,
Oh, here you
Mr.
go.
Thank you, Mr. Carr.
I'll just leave this up here.
Good evening, gentlemen. I was asked to prepare an estimated cost if the time came where the landfill was not available for the city of Greensburg and its residents to utilize. And I've tried to put something together. There's a hard copy for each of you.
Just 1 minute. I'll unplug you.
I'm unplugged. Okay. I'll go through the individual costs when we have the slide.
Excuse me, Mark, can you state your name? for
Oh,
the
Mark
record?
Foster Kemper, City Street Commissioner. What I've done is I've looked at FEMA cost for operational expenses for the trucks I have in my fleet. I've looked at my additional labor cost. I've looked at what's going to occur when I have to replace trucks because of the magnitude of travel. And I've also looked at the labor cost and the additional equipment cost for our heavy trash events on an annualized basis. There we have it. The first thing we addressed was truck operating cost. I went to the Federal Emergency Management Administration and looked at their cost that they have for reimbursement whenever they have a disaster, and got the exact cost for 2019 for operating cost per mile on a truck, which is approximately $1.26. These are all based on a landfill, which would be south side, would be our closest facility, 54 miles away. So we would drive 216 miles a day times 260 days in a year, and you see the cost. The labor cost is based on travel time, unloading time. For each of the trucks, it's approximately 6.5 hours additional, times the same number of days, annualized cost of $58,000. Our current trucks, we try to maintain for 12 years. And our annual travel distance for those trucks is about 7,000. If you'll take a look, you can soon see we're going to put about 26,000 miles on a truck a year. So we're hoping that our 12-year truck life will at least hold for the 6 years. So there's the cost of the 2 trucks to be replaced in that time frame, which would be an additional expense. And then we have 2 heavy trash events, and the costs are minimal, but that would be the cost of the roll-off, because we're going to have to create a makeshift transfer station on city property, because I can't get my trucks to Indianapolis and back multiple times a day. So I would have that cost for those roll-off containers and the labor cost for that function. Anyhow, the total annualized cost is $203,000 and some change. The next lines down, you see $3,484. That's the amount of residential properties we have that are billed on a monthly basis. We collect a fee 12 times a year for a total of 41,808 collections. And that would mean a monthly cost at today's prices of $4.87. Looking at the landfill lasting for 10 to 15 years, I use 10 years to keep it down to a minimum, and a 3.5% inflation rate. That would be $6.86 a month, where we currently stand at $3.50. So we're looking at almost a 200% increase in fees to the residents of Greensburg. Any questions with the calculations?
But you'd be adding jobs.
I would.
I have a question. So we get trash from other counties. North Branch doesn't drive their trash in here. Why would Greensburg have to drive their trash out? I'm confused.
From
Why
what
would
I
you-
understand, if we don't have a landfill, I don't have a place to dump my trash.
North Vernon doesn't have a landfill. They have a place to dump their trash here.
We have a landfill.
Yeah, we have a
That-
landfill.
We have
Right.
Let's not expand our landfill and take everybody else's trash.
What's the
Let's just keep
projected?
our own.
if
Hold
we
on,
don't
hold on,
expand?
hold on, hold on.
I mean, that's my
I'm just
question.
here, that my understanding is that if I did not have this landfill, it would cease to exist without an expansion at some point in time, and that's 10 to 15 years.
Mr. Klosterkamp fulfilled the request of this board asking him if Best Way continues operating at this landfill and cannot expand the landfill. So this has been based on the current business model, approximately 15 to 20 years on the current volume. So if we deny the request for their expansion at the point that that is full, what this city would do. Does that make sense?
This is nothing more than hypothetical, really.
So has anybody done a study on what it would cost to get clean water?
Hold on, please. We're gonna open this up. I'm sure we'll be here for hours, but everyone that's gonna talk is gonna come right on up here because you saw what happened about 30 seconds ago. It just takes off. So please be mindful. There are a lot of people in this room. Please be mindful. If you have a question, please raise your hand, come up here. But we've got a few presentations, folks that are on this agenda. Gene would like to speak, so hold on. We're gonna allow this to finish and then we'll open up for questions. Thank you.
I have no other comments unless you have a question directed at me.
No, I don't think so.
That's what I would like to ask a question on, what's on the board right now, if I might.
Questions regarding this budget? If you've got a question, please come over here and state your name, talk into the microphone.
My name's Jim McIntyre. I'm looking at the numbers there and I want to be realistic. You say you expect your trucks to last 12 years. Currently. When was the last time you replaced a truck?
We've replaced 2 of them in the last 3 years.
How old were they?
One was 12, I believe the other one was 13.
13, so you were able to maintain them for the 12 years. What's your current truck's conditions, and are you going to be able to continue maintaining trucks for 12 years at a safe level? Right now, your trucks that you have standing, how many trucks do you have?
2,
You only have 2 trucks?
yes.
You were able to maintain them for 12, what was the cost of those to maintain them and keep them operational for 12 years? In reference to those numbers, What
Probably
did you-
pretty close to the $1.26
you were able to maintain them for $1.26
per mile.
per mile on a 12-year-old truck.
That's over the life of the truck.
Right.
In other words, the trucks I have now, I don't have $1.26 in.
Right,
But
'cause
over the
they're-
life of the truck, I will average $1.26. That's fuel, tires, maintenance, repairs, etc.
And you think you'll have to replace them every 6 years when you,
I'll go from 7,000 miles travel a year to approximately 26,000 miles.
where are you hauling it to? You've got a
Right now,
landfill out there.
right here.
Yeah,
This is based on not having that landfill, as that's what was requested by this board. If this landfill did not exist,
I
I'm
don't
taking the
think,
south side of Indianapolis, so the mileage would increase dramatically.
I haven't heard where they were planning on shutting this landfill down if they didn't get an expansion. So why are we using fake numbers to,
Hold on just a second. We asked Mr. Klosterkamper to
Right.
propose the costs incurred by the city should this landfill finish out its current capacity and then end the landfill in Decatur County. I think there's a lot of people in this county that wish it weren't here. So if it weren't, this is approximately what Mr. Klosterkamper expects our costs would do. I think we can continue on this.
but we've established that it's here now and it's still operational and it's still working,
correct.
right?
And that's why this is looking at 10 years out, not.
That's why the
what would
10-year
happen today.
timeline on there, because 10 years is about when they say what they got left, so.
There are questions regarding this? thank you. We appreciate that. That's question's been brought up a lot, so thanks for this.
Okay. Can I pull it out, Mark? Can I unplug?
Mr. Denny, anyone else from the city like to speak? Any other? Okay. All right, thank you guys. Appreciate you being here. Thanks, Josh, for preparing this. Gene Johanneman has prepared a presentation.
Have you got it loaded, Debbie?
I just.
Working on it? Okay. My name's Jean Johanneman, and I'll wait till she gets it loaded so that we can present. And I do want the board and the media to know that when I'm done, what I'm presenting, I have documented proof of and will hand out to the board and to the media. Okay, my objective is to present documented statistics supporting the health, safety, and well-being of Decatur County residents. Next, please. This is a study by IUPUI dated January the 17th of 2019. It was funded by the IU Simon Cancer Center and the National Cancer Institute. This study shows how 34 out of 92 counties in Indiana have a higher rate of cancer deaths, and we are included in that 34. This study attributes the deaths to the lack of proper medical care, but does not identify the root cause of the cancer. Next, please. This is from U.S. News and World Report. It's a website of theirs, and it is on the healthiest communities. Find your preferred community. The stats shown are how we compare on cancer, and you can see Decatur County is higher on cancer than the U.S. average, and the unsafe drinking water exposure is for Decatur County is off the charts in comparison to the rest.
Do you know, Gene, how they come up with that, with this number?
I don't know how they did, but you're gonna have the website to go to and check everything out on this.
Okay.
Okay? And it'll be in printed form, so you'll be able to go on and get it. Okay, the next one, please. And according to all the meetings that I've attended, including the roundtable meeting, how are the professionals saying we are protected? And this is IU, Purdue, and IDEM. And these are the methods which they say we are protected by. Give a second to look at those. And then let's go on to the next. Okay, that map is the same as the map over here on the wall, but the black line is the current landfill. And the aquifers, if you read the information with the aquifers, it says that these bedrock aquifers have complex fracturing systems. Once a contaminant is introduced, it will be difficult to track and remediate. These systems are susceptible where clay is thin or absent. And my question to this is, what happens when you dig a 100-foot deep hole? Next, please. This chart is from the DNR. It's a graph that shows the 6 wells of the city of Greensburg. And you can see the aquifer is listed here. And it shows Greensburg all through here. It shows the aquifer system, and it shows the well numbers. And I want you to keep in mind, again, as was said earlier, that the city also sells water to rural water. Next chart, please. This is an aquifer sensitivity map. Indiana University did a study of the aquifers in the state of Indiana. Yellow on the chart is moderate sensitivity. The orange, which is not showing up real brightly on this, but you can barely see it, and I'll point the laser to it, is right there. That is high sensitivity. The comment on the left of the screen is from IU Sally Letzinger, PhD, who worked on this aquifer sensitivity chart. I think it's a little hard to read, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. The majority of the map you sent was classified as moderate, yellow, with 3 small squares as high orange, So yes, that means that the materials in the near surface at those locations are moderately or highly likely to allow infiltration into the subsurface at those locations, and if there are contaminants there, vulnerable, the aquifers could be more susceptible to contamination. She also said the landfill would be lined with materials that prevent direct communication of water and contaminants with the aquifer if it is engineered and maintained properly, which opens it up to human error. Next, please. I'm repeating this memo from the State Board of Health merely not because of the contaminant that's listed as was brought out in the Purdue geologist, but because it says clearly in there that there was a previous concern for a threat to the aquifer by someone from the state of Indiana. The next chart, please. This article is Landfill Failures, the Buried Truth. This article is from the Center for Health and Environmental Justice, known as the CHEJ. Next, please. This is from the CHEJ. And they show how clay liners fail, including some chemicals can degrade the clay, and they give other reasons why clay liners can fail. CHEG also shows how leachate collections systems can fail, and you'll be getting documented information on this. Next, please. The CHEJ quotes from the US EPA that all landfills will eventually leak. They also state that leachate transport from both old and modern landfills is a potentially serious problem. The CHEJ on liners, the best demonstrated available technology for clay and plastic liners, allow leakage rates of 0.02 to 1 gallon per acre per day. This would result in 730 to 36,500 gallons per year on a 100-acre landfill. Next, please. Okay, this is from an email between Jeff Smith of the city sewer plant and myself, and he tells the procedure of how they treat the leachate from the landfill that's pumped into Greensburg. So it's treated, and after all, it goes through the stages of treatment. The treated water goes into Gas Creek, and the organic solids are broken down and land applied. During the roundtable discussion, the mayor said as creek bed applied, and we have understood from further conversations with Mr. Smith that it's not just creek bed, but also land applied. Okay, next chart, please. Okay, article is from the Associated Press. It's dated September the 12th of 2019. This is from Lapeer, Michigan, and they were treating their leachate basically and sewage the same way that we were. And a chemical called PFAS was showing up in the drinking water and in the food. And I don't know if you know this, but most states don't test for PFAS. The town expects to pay $3 million to have the waste retreated at another facility and shipped to a landfill. Studies show that PFAS is associated with an increased risk of cancer and damage to organs. The next chart, please. This is the Associated Press again, September 12, 2019. PFAS can come from industrial wastewater, but it also comes from residential sewage, which includes carpets, clothes, and other household items. PFAS are grease and water-resistant compounds known as forever chemicals because they don't degrade naturally and are believed to linger indefinitely in the environment. Next, please. This is a Fox News article dated 9/21/19, and it's quoting Olga Nedenko, PhD. The vast majority of community water systems meet legal standards, yet the latest research shows that contaminants present in the water at these concentrations, perfectly legal, can still harm human health. More than 100,000 cancer cases could be caused by contaminants in the tap water, the study finds. We need to prioritize source water protection to keep contaminants from getting into the drinking water. Next, please. This is a 13 Investigates article of Johnson County. The finished drinking water, treated and ready to be delivered to consumers, had elevated levels near the contamination limit. Items said the water was safe to consume. Enviroforensics found the water was causing brain cancer in children. I point this out to point that government entities are not always right. Okay, and that's the end of the slides, but I want to add two more things that I didn't have time to put into it. Rumpke is proposing a landfill expansion in Ohio, and one of their selling points was the landfill environmental safeguards they had. No regional aquifer has been identified in the vicinity of the landfill, so there is concerns about these. The other thing I want to point out, environmental bills to watch in the 2020 legislative session. Senate Bill number 414. Senate Bill 414 would require the Indiana State Department of Health, and notice that Indiana Department of Health was the 1985 report I referred to earlier. It would require the State Department of Health to establish state